What's going on, y'all? From the title, so we're talking about how to build a reliable LS for the cheap. So I'm gonna jump straight into it. So what I do on all my builds or any motors I have out of the car or whatever, anything I'm doing like that, or junkyard engines I got, Facebook Marketplace Facebook Marketplace engines. This is what I do. So first, go ahead and throw her on the engine stand. What I do is I snatch off the oil pan. Take off your oil pickup tube, take off your windage tray that's underneath your oil pickup tube. And what I do, like I said, we're keeping it cheap here. So I shake down the crank, take a pry bar, see if the thrust is right, make sure it doesn't have too much crank thrust. Then I shake down my rod bearings. You can do this if you want to. You can take off your main caps and check all your clearances, which is always a good idea to make sure you know they're not too loose, because if they're too loose, they're not going to last long. Obviously, if they're too loose, you'll need some machining done, get your crank polish, get new main bearings. If everything, is not in spec or whatever, you think it's not going to be right, you don't feel comfortable doing it, because that bottom end stuff can get a little tricky sometimes. So main bearings, check those. If they're good, send it. Check your rod bearings, shake down your rods. Me personally, I take my rods out every time to inspect the bearings. If you can run your finger across them and they're smooth, you don't feel any scored and they look good, you can send them. So if you take your rods out, while you have the rods out, which I think is a great idea, what I think you should do, especially if you have a Gen 3 engine. So on the Gen 3 engines, they actually have like drainage holes on the pistons, and what happens is, over time the carbon and stuff builds up on the ring lands and on the skirts a little bit, and it clogs those holes so the oil doesn't drain back down, obviously to your pan and stuff good enough sometimes, and that also can cause a little bit of an oil consumption issue, or more than they usually have. All right. Oh yeah, we're talking about pistons. So pistons, what I like to do, obviously I like to clean mine up. What I do is I just take a red or gray Scotch-Brite that's slightly worn out, and spray my parts down with brake cleaner, and just get them real clean. You can clean your skirts, but just be very careful, because you don't want to score up your skirts, because scored skirts are going to equal scored cylinder walls, so you don't want that. Clean them. While you're in there, me personally, I replace the piston rings. Just put new rings in to get your gap right. Whether it's NA or you're going boost. If it's boost, you're going to want more ring gap, because what happens is, obviously there's heat going on in the cylinder. So if you got too tight a ring gap with the boost creates more heat. So it's going to kiss your ring gap. Then that can cause ring land failure, which means you're going to need a motor. So you don't want that. All right, so we got that. So where do we go over? Main bearings. Rod bearings, pistons, rings, and this is in no particular order. I'm just saying it as I read it off my notepad here. So the next thing, we went over pistons. Let's stick to the bottom end for right now. Okay, oil pump. This is a big thing. So I've had good luck with the stock oil pumps, but to be totally honest, if you're already in there, I would just go ahead and get yourself a new oil pump, either OEM or like a milling, regular volume or high volume. While we're there at the oil pump, our pickup tube that was over top of our windage tray when we dropped our pan, the pickup tube, there is an O-ring on that. A very common issue with the LS engines, I'm sure all you guys know, is that O-ring gets smushed over time, and once you take it out, if you don't replace it and you put it back in, you'll probably struggle with low oil pressure issues, which is one of the, I would say, top 3 reasons you could suffer from low oil pressure if you don't have if your pump's no good or whatever. Excuse me, if you have a good pump. So another thing is too, you want to look out for, depending on, so say you get a new oil pump, like a milling, it's going to come with different size O-rings. It's really the thickness that's different. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to read the milling instructions and make sure you put the right O-ring on the pickup tube you have, because there's different pickup tubes. You got the car pickup tubes, Corvette. Then you got the truck ones, and I think there's two different types of truck ones. So you want to make sure you use the right one, or it's going to be too, it's either going to be too difficult to get it in the oil pump when you're feeding it in, because obviously the O-ring's too thick, and if it's too small, it'll go right in, then you won't get the correct seal you need. So, okay, we're on the bottom end. Another thing, oil pressure wise. So in the back of LS engines, behind the rear cover where your rear main seal is, there's actually what they call an oil barbell. So what that does is pretty much it helps divert the oil up into the engine and does all this stuff. You will want to replace that. I see people send it all the time and it's fine, but me personally, while you have the engine out the car and you're already doing all this work, I would just go ahead and replace it. So okay, so we're in the back of the engine right now. So obviously we're going to want to do a rear cover seal, then obviously a rear main seal. Then we're going to move back to the front. You're going to want to do your front timing cover seal, your crank seal. And while we're in there, while you got the front taken apart, before you do your cover, you're going to want to do a timing chain. I would definitely do a timing chain, especially on a Gen 3, because once they get high mileage, they get really loose and sloppy. So, you know, it could be fine for a while, but I would just go ahead and replace that. Get you a nice timing chain, and you can actually do a tensioner upgrade, because Gen 3s don't come with that center. It's not a tensioner, it's a guide. You can do a guide upgrade like I believe the Gen 4s have. There's a 2-bolt guide that would go in the center, and I believe it bolts to the cam thrust plate on a Gen 3. It will bolt to and it will help keep your chain nice and tight, and it won't have too much slack in it. So if you want to do that upgrade, you can. It's not necessary, because once you get a new chain, it's pretty stiff as is from my experiences, but you know, there's always that extra precaution you can take. So sure, everybody's been waiting for camshaft. So if you're going to, just use a stock cam or whatever, most people want to run a cam. What you're going to want to do is obviously pull your cam out. Definitely inspect your cam bearings. I know people say, you let the magic out when you take the cam out and inspect the bearings, but you're going to want to do that anyway, because you don't want to do all that work and spend this money just to have to tear it back down because you had, torn up cam bearings or whatever. Because it's going to make material, then it's going to go in your oil, it's going to run through the whole motor, then, you got to rebuild it or just get another motor. So inspect your cam bearings. If you're going to run a stock cam that came out the motor, you just want a simple build. Make sure you inspect the cam. Inspect the cam lobes. Make sure there's no, abnormal scoring or low spots or any of that, because one, it's going to tear up your new lifters, and two, it's going to misfire. So you're going to want to do that. You get all that stuff sorted out. So we're going to start slowly moving to the top end. So while we're on the camshaft, you will want to get new lifters. If you're going to take it apart, you might as well just put lifters in it. I know they're not that cheap for OEM lifters or, a quality aftermarket lifter, but it's a peace of mind. I'm telling you, you don't want to do all this work, and just have to take the heads back off because you got a stuck lifter. So you're going to want to run an OEM lifter, or, a very reputable company like Johnson or something like that, Cam Motion, there's plenty of options out there, but you will want a quality lifter. Okay, we're talking about lifters. So if you are going to do an aftermarket camshaft, you will want hardened push rods, because the factory push rods, once you start getting into the bigger cams, they are known to possibly bend. So you don't want that either. You don't want bent push rods or none of that. All right, so we got push rods out the way, so let's start moving to the top end. Head gaskets. So LS's actually come with, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody in the comments will say something. I believe 2 different style head gaskets. So like on the early LS ones, I believe, with like the 853 cylinder heads, those require a composite head gasket. It's not MLS. It's like a kind of like the old school small block Chevys run. It's like a it's almost like one of those cheaper exhaust gaskets you get, and like, you know, say like some aftermarket eBay headers or something like that. It's kind of like that material. So those engines will run a composite head gasket because they have a countersink area on the outer edge of the head when you flip it over, and you need the composite so it'll seal that area or it's going to leak coolant. So composite head gaskets, if you don't have those type of cylinder heads with the recess section on the bottom side of it, you're going to run MLS head gaskets. You're going to want to run a quality multi-layer steel head gasket. You don't want to get, you know, the cheap Amazon or eBay ones or whatever. You know, they may look good from the pictures, but I've had those head gaskets, you know, I've put them on a perfectly straight, you know, decked milled engine, you know, deck block milled heads, whatever, perfectly flat with those cheap head gaskets, and I've had them leak right away. So like I said, you're doing all that work, you don't want to cheap out on something like head gaskets. They're not even that expensive. They're like 80 to 90 bucks per head gasket for a quality one. So okay, we got head gaskets out the way. Next, I would say, so if the motor is going to be naturally aspirated, you will be okay with new factory head bolts. You do not want to reuse the head bolts you took off the engine because they are torque to yield. So pretty much, you know, once you get them torqued, then angled to the degree they need to be, they actually stretch. So they're not reusable. They're one-time users. So you're going to want to chuck those. If it's going to be naturally aspirated, you can use factory head bolts, like I said. If it's going to see boost, I've seen people make mad power on factory head bolts, but me personally, I would just go ahead and throw some ARPs in it or something with the same clamping force. You know, I think there's some other ones like Exotic Performance or something like that. They make a decent head bolt, head stud. Then I heard the Speedmaster ones were pretty decent. Then obviously you got, you know, the Top Dog ARPs, which I would go with. We were talking about head studs. I'm sorry, brain fart. Head studs. Then, okay, so we're going to get back to the lifter section and push rods. So, all right, you got your seals and all that stuff. You know, you got your heads on, whatnot, everything torqued down, angled. You're going to want to, so, okay, let me back up for a second. So if you have a stock camshaft, your rocker arms will be fine. You know, obviously take them off, you know, shake them down. Well, you have to take them off anyway to get your heads off, but take them off and shake the center section, because those actually have needle roller bearings inside of them, and they are known to fail on LS engines once they start getting up into the higher mileage. You know, you might just have bad luck, and it could be before higher mileage. So you're going to want to definitely you're going to definitely want to inspect your rockers. And if you're going to run an aftermarket camshaft, you're definitely going to want to do a trunnion upgrade. So what a trunnion upgrade is, it gets rid of the center two-piece section in the stock rockers with the needle bearings, and it's one solid piece with a bushing, and it has a C-clips on each side of the rocker. So it gets rid of, you know, the potential failure of a needle bearing coming out of the rocker arm and going down your motor, then, you know, going down the rabbit hole. So that rocker arms, take that into consideration. You know, if you're going to run an aftermarket camshaft, obviously you need higher lift valve springs unless you have like a drop-in cam. It's not high lift or anything like that. So we got that. Honestly, that's pretty much the important. Oh, one last thing. Sorry, probably two more things. What was I talking about? One last thing. I wanted to get into, what was that? Oh, okay, the camshaft. So when you have your front timing cover off, the camshaft is held in by a 3-bolt thrust plate. So when you take that off, you are going to want to replace that, and make sure you replace it with a quality one, because you sometimes you get some, there's cheaper ones and they're not dimensionally milled correctly. And it'll cause scoring on that actual, it'll cause scoring on that plate, or it will cause scoring on the cam gear. Excuse me. Yes, it'll cause scoring on the cam thrust plate because the cam gear on the outside, the thrust isn't correct, so it's going to rub on that and start removing material. So you don't want that. So make sure you get a quality one of those. So I think we went over pretty much main bearings, rod bearings, oil pump, oil O-ring, all your seals, obviously. Sorry about that. I ran out of space on the old iPhone. Yeah, so all our seals, piston rings, inspect the rods, clean the obvious stuff too. Clean your block surface, clean your heads real good. Make sure you don't have any like cross-threaded bolt holes or anything too. And a common thing with the LS too is they break exhaust studs, so if you got to dig those out, it's kind of fun. The easiest way, obviously you've probably seen multiple people do it as well, to nut to it and get them out. I've had pretty good luck with that. I've had some where I've had to just take them to the machine shop and get them drilled out because I couldn't get them to spin out, but it happens. And the last thing I wanted to cover too, so when it comes to your Trinion rocker arms, make sure you get a quality rocker arm. You don't want to get a, cheap eBay upgrade or none of that, because it's probably going to fail on you. Then touch the quality lifters. Make sure you get the quality lifters. Another thing too, make sure if you're running an aftermarket intake manifold, make sure you get the correct gaskets, because you don't, because if you get the wrong gaskets, just say for example, if you have like it's not Holley, is it Holley? I'm sure somebody will correct me. A Holley manifold for like a carburetor or something. You don't want to use, your standard thick truck manifolds. You're going to want to get the thinner aftermarket ones with the O-ring on them, because once you start tightening your bolts down that it comes with, it won't be that much thread down into it, because the extra thickness from the thick truck gaskets. So you're going to want to make sure you get the right one for that. But anything like truck manifolds like that, just go ahead and get your Fel-Pros or OEMs or whatever. You want to get a quality intake manifold gasket, because that will cause vacuum leaks. You don't want that. You'll be chasing such a simple issue, especially if you don't have a smoke tester, because a smoke tester pretty much, can help you pinpoint a vacuum leak within a few minutes. But if you don't have one, it could be difficult to figure that out. But I think that's all. If I miss something, you can just tell me in the comments, and I could touch on that subject to the best of my knowledge. And I hope this helped you guys out on building a reliable LS swap. See y'all later.